Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Anarchist Wine Co.'s Inquisitive Sips. We are a family-owned winery with three different faces. You're familiar with Anarchist Wine Co. The focus of Anarchist is exploring new techniques and varietal combinations. Our sibling brand Foundry is centered around the more traditional approach of a particular grape varietal or grape varietals and or wines created from specific places, time and place. The one ring to rule them all, the Wine Foundry. Napa Valley's premier custom winemaking venue. Here, connoisseurs, geeks, and the merely curious go from wine drinker to winemaker. Tonight, my colleagues Steve Ryan, Patrick Sabo, and I are excited to taste Cowgirl Creamery cheeses. Cowgirl has captured every cheese award on the planet. They are local legends of the food and wine sphere. In addition to tasting world-worthy wine and cheese, we're going to kind of step beyond the usual pairing talks to explore the history and backstory on these award winners. With that, I am going to raise a glass to health, honor, and happiness. And Steve?
Yes, sir.
Let's taste some bubbles, if that's fair. And before we dive in to talk with Sarah about Cowgirl, we are tasting the 2015 Blanc de Blancs from San Giacomo Vineyard. Can you tell me about this wine? And if you can do it in the voice of one of the characters from Downton Abbey, I will give you $10.
I've never seen the show, so I'm gonna just have to. I'll do it. I will tell you about the 2015 Blanc de Blanc. And this is 100% Chardonnay. It is from an area called the Petaluma Gap. We've covered that area quite extensively anytime we have Chardonnay or Pinot Noir on this series. It is a very small area in the Sonoma Coast, the much larger area, Sonoma Coast growing region. So Patrick and the team made this in 2015. A quick recap of how you make sparkling is he harvested this fruit end of August in 2015. I think it was, I've got in my notes, August 29th. And when you're making sparkling wine, you want to have high acidity to the grapes. And so you pick it at a much lower sugar than you do when you're making Chardonnay. So for example, we use a scale called Brix in winemaking. And if you're making a still wine Chardonnay, you're going to be picking that 23, 24 Brix. Some people might pick it at 22. For this sparkling wine, it was picked at 17.8, which means that the sugar is going to be quite a bit lower, and therefore the acid's going to be a lot higher. And Patrick first made a cuvee, which is essentially just the primary fermentation, going through getting that done, and then we bottle it up. And when we bottle it up, we add a little bit of sugar, we add a little bit of yeast, and mix it all up, and then it gets bottled up. And in the bottle, the yeast will eat the sugar, and that's called method champenoise, and that is how you get the bubbles. So the wine is dry, and it would be considered, I think it would be considered an extra brut. Patrick, is that correct?
Yeah, you know, brut is a pretty large category, from 0 to like 25 grams per liter or something like that. This is closer to 0. So whether you consider it extra brut or just in the brut category, then it's dry. The answer is.
Awesome. So thank you very much for that. And so it's lower in alcohol. It's, you know, low to mid 13% alcohol. But that's the bubbles. How you get that is from the secondary fermentation, the method champenoise. So on this, we're going to probably note some. A little bit of, you do get a little yeasty quality to the aromatic, which I quite like. I also get some kind of stone fruit, not super ripe stone fruit, as in peaches, for example. Also some lemon lime. And we can get into that a little more in a second. Stu, would you like to introduce our friend here?
Well, my goodness, we've had somebody join us. We're really excited to introduce, from the Legends of Cowgirl Creamery, Sarah Melenda. Welcome and welcome. I'm glad you made it.
Hi, so sorry about that technological.
Traffic is terrible on the internet. Traffic is terrible. You can't get anywhere. We're really excited to have you join us. We're tasting the 2015 Blanc de Blancs, And Steve is going to get into some cheese talk with you right now. But welcome, everybody. We've got Sarah.
Hello.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, there you go. We just kind of went through a little bit of the 2015 Foundry Wines Blanc de Blanc, and we had paired this up together with the Red Hawk. So as we kind of get into that, if you wouldn't mind maybe telling us a little bit about the Red Hawk and dovetail into sort of how Cowgirl came to be.
Yeah, definitely. I'll probably start with the Cowgirl story real quick, just give you guys a little background on kind of where we came from and how we began making cheese. Basically, our two founders, Peg and Sue Conley and Peg Smith, they are legends in the cheese world now, but back in the 70s, they were very new to the scene. They both went to the University of Tennessee, graduated in 76, hopped in a VW bus, came out to the West Coast. They were both interested in entering the restaurant industry, and at the time it was it was a revolution at the time. A lot of chefs were starting to focus and turn to look towards local producers and small batch producers. So there was a big change happening in the restaurant industry there at that time. Sue and Peg were right in the thick of it. Peg worked at Chez Panisse for many years, and Sue worked at Betty's Diner, just to name some of the big restaurant names there. They spent a lot of time in Point Reyes. And I don't know if any of you guys have been to Point Reyes before, but it is a beautiful place. There are a lot of beef ranchers and different farmers, a lot of small producers. Some of them are making cheese. There were two main movements happening at the time that I want to focus on. The first was that Strauss Dairy was in the works of becoming one of the first organic dairies west of the Mississippi. This is important in that they wanted to make sure that, the quality of life for the cows was as best as it could be, as well as just providing, the best milk they possibly could provide for their customers. So Ellen Strauss is kind of the godmother of, as they say, of kind of West Marin and protecting the community, specifically with the agriculture community. She was working with small ranchers out there there they are. Let's see, on the right, that's Sue. On the left is Ellen. That was the early days of the farmer's market out in Point Reyes. As you can see, it was, Albert is her son, is Ellen's son. So that was their little pop-up farm stand in Point Reyes. But they were working to protect the local ranchers, meaning basically what was happening in San Francisco at the time, there was a lot of money, especially in real estate. And so as housing prices increased in San Francisco, so did the land prices in West Marin. A lot of people wanted to develop that land, build more housing. This obviously would kick the ranchers off the land that they'd owned for, 100, 200 years. So Ellen and Sue and all these people got together. They created MALT. It's the Marin Agricultural Land Trust. It basically is a trust that gives money. They sell the rights of their property to the trust. The trust then gives them money, and they can put money back into their business. So it's basically preserving the land in perpetuity, so that someone who went to Point Reyes in the early 1900s is going to go again. Not realistically, but someone could go again in 2020. It's going to look exactly the same as it did 100 years ago. So that's a really an important step that those they spearheaded back in the day. So Sue and Peg were inspired by all this local action happening. They bought that old barn in Point Reyes. That's one of the photos on there, if you could throw that one up there. They installed a little creamery, a little cheese counter, and a sandwich shop. Their idea was to make some fresh cheeses. So they first started off making cottage cheese, fromage blanc, and creme fraiche. They made these with the purpose of there we go. There's that barn. It's beautiful. It was very rundown when they first got it. That's how it looks today, but very rustic, very true to character for Cowgirl. As you can see, a little side note, Tamales Bay Foods is one of our other arms of our company, because we do also represent other producers in the market besides our own cheeses. And so Under the Tamales Bay Foods arm, we represent other creameries. We do some salami and some other like accoutrements. We work with Rustic Bakery and some other jam makers and such. So kind of where that, that falls under that category. But yeah, Sue and Peg just started making cheese, and they were delivering it to the local restaurants in San Francisco. And yeah, so that's kind of where they started. Obviously, it evolved along the way. So some of the cheeses we're going to taste today. So great segue into Red Hawk.
Let's check out the Red Hawk.
Yeah, let's do it. This is just, it's magic. One of the reasons why I love this cheese is that it was an accident. So small segue. This one is our Mount Tam. We're going to taste that later. That was one of the first cheeses that Sue and Peg made. Sue and Peg had made a batch of Mount Tam, and they were aging it. It ages for about 60 days before it goes to, gets in our mouths. But they noticed that one of the wheels of Mount Tam was developing this super orange rind, and they're like, what the heck is going on here? They're looking for that beautiful bloomy rind, and it wasn't growing. So Sue, she's like, you know what, we're going to brine it. We're going to salt brine it. So often in washed rind cheeses, you wash the rind in a salt brine. This basically took that kind of buttery, more mild Mount Tam and went the entire opposite direction. It's pungent, it's beefy, it's strong, it's beautiful. Still triple cream, organic cow's milk straight from the Strauss dairy. I mean, it's stunning, it's beautiful. But yeah, let's taste with the Blanc de Blanc.
Let's check it out.
So we'll go recommended as kind of a sip of the wine, take that down, take in some cheese, and then you follow it maybe with a sip of wine. Is that what you'd recommend, Sarah?
I would actually go, yeah, you can do both, but I like to do a taste of the cheese and then kind of finish with the wine. But you know what? Whatever you prefer.
Are doing them at the same time?
The winery is telling you to drink more wine, and
Drink
then
more.
The cheesery says more cheese, yeah. How many people call it a cheesery?
A cheesery? You're actually the first I've heard say that.
Steve, trademark that real quick if you would.
So
Right.
what
That one for you.
So what do we look for on a triple cream here?
All right, of course. I just took a bite
Oh
of
my
cheese.
goodness!
exactly. Good job. Good timing.
That's what you look for, a bite.
With this washed rind cheese, it's it definitely is for a certain crowd. It's a little more pungent than most cheeses. I think this is for the true cheese lover loves Red Hawk. That's how I see it. Another fun story for you guys. This cheese is made in Point Reyes Station at the original creamery. About 2 years ago, we opened up a new creamery in Petaluma. They tried to replicate the recipe there. It looked completely different. They ended up hiring a local team of scientists to swab the room where the Red Hawk was aging, and they found like 200 different types of bacteria that were only present in Point Reyes, and they attributed it to the climate and the microbiology of the air since it's so close to the ocean. So trying to replicate this Red Hawk cheese in Petaluma is never going to happen, and it never will happen. So kind of a fun fact on that cheese.
Hey, Sarah, we have a question we have two questions that came in, but we'll get one right now from Daphne Pierce of Bodega, California. Did they identify that microbe at the facility which actually causes the red dusting? Were they able to figure that out? And then it's kind of a two-part question. And do you know who the first person was brave enough to actually taste it? To know that they were not going to go down a dark path with the cheese. So do you know if some microbial specialists have identified that specific strain which made it go dusty red? If not, it's okay. And then who was the person who actually was brave enough to taste it?
Definitely, yes. So first part of the question, what's kind of another, magic fact about the Red Hawk is that there are literally 100 different types of bacteria growing on this rind. They were not able to find 1 or 5 or 10. There's literally hundreds. So that's what makes Red Hawk unique. And the fact that it can only be made in, one area in the world, basically. I just think that's what makes this cheese so special. Second part of the question, I believe it was one of the cheesemakers, Maureen, and she's actually our CFO now, so obviously it didn't scare her away.
She's terrible with numbers, but it's okay. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Another quick question, Sarah. Somebody asked, and I know my own personal answer for this one, but I won't spoil it. When does one eat the rind versus not eat the rind?
Right. As far as when we do tastings in our office, we always taste the rind, especially with soft cheeses, with bloomy rind cheeses. I think that you get a kind of more of a complete flavor in the whole tasting. You taste all the flavors present. For example, in the middle of the Red Hawk, I'll cut another piece here so you can see. There's a difference in the paste already, right? So in the middle, there's kind of a white, kind of lighter cream. On the outside, it's a little bit darker. That's going to be your more like buttery. That's where that triple cream comes in. And then the outside, on that rind, you're getting all sorts of other flavors there too. With the Red Hawk, I just get like beefy, really like sweet cream notes. But with every cheese, you're going to get a different, note on the rind. Again, personal preference, though. Some people like it, some people don't. So.
Thank you very much. And then
I love it.
Go ahead, Patrick.
I like the bubbles, but the cheese is killer. So that's really hard to, the bubbles are overshadowed by the yumminess of the cheese in this case. But so if the cheese wasn't very good, I'd say the bubbles are amazing. But in this case, I'm licking my fingers. So
You're too modest.
Mount Tam is great, but the Red Hawk is awesome. And so I actually like the Pierre Point too. I really liked all three of the softer cheeses we have here, and Wagon Wheel too. I mean, so I really enjoyed doing a tasting ahead of time to try all these separate, against each other. And as Stu mentioned, it's pairing is right before you got on. Pairing is very subjective. What flavors do you like and what you think goes best with this or that. Some things are a little bit. I think a lot of people would agree on, and sometimes it's a bit more. It just depends, kind of like on what you like. And so it was fun to try it. And then we talked, talked about with Steve or with our owner, Valerie, to see what she thinks too. And it's interesting to hear. And of course, we would be interested to hear what your take on and what you usually like to pair with the Red Hawk, and whether or not this is something that's, traditional, I guess, done with for you, or if this was a different pairing for you that you liked or didn't like, perhaps. And so, how do you think about it?
Yeah, definitely. I think in general, any triple cream with that super buttery, creamy, it's almost like a very lactic sensation in your mouth. You almost kind of need bubbles to cut through that cream a little bit. And that's where you kind of get that mouth feel. Like it's a very balanced mouth feel with the cheese and the bubble together. I find that if you have, even like champagne or even like Prosecco, if the cheese is not as creamy, it almost falls short underneath the wine, right? It can't stand up to the bubble. So that's where I think triple creams come into play. And then as far as, washed rind versus, I think you can pair like the triple cream Red Hawk example with this Blanc de Blanc goes super well, but it wouldn't go with every champagne. I mean, it's definitely subjective, but for example, the Mount Tam, which we'll taste soon, is more versatile. It's got mellower flavors, so this is going to pair with more types of wine, essentially. So
the rind is way more subdued on the Mount Tam than it is on the Red Hawk. The Red Hawk it's almost interesting. I almost picked up like I know it's strong. I wasn't quite sure. As I picked up, it's like it has the nose on it is impressive. I think to me, I like it very much. Of course,
yeah.
The Mount Tam has always been my favorite until I had the Red Hawk, and I was like, I'm not sure. So it's really tasty.
I love I think what works about it is that the Blanc de Blanc has a little bit of a nuttiness in the aromatic, and then with the pungent bit, I think, Sarah, you described something as like beef tones, right? Which I've never heard of described in cheese, but it totally hits it out of the park right there for me, at least. And so it's this really pungent, kind of meaty cheese that stands up to the kind of nutty, yeasty, doughy type of aromatic that comes from the yeast in the wine. But then the wine for me really kind of acts like, once I eat the cheese and I drink the wine, that it totally cleanses my palate, and I'm ready to go to what's next or whatever. So that's what I really like about it quite a bit. But
Does that mean that you eat the whole wheel then? I mean, because you keep going, or how does that work?
yeah, I do. It doesn't roll as well once I take a bite out of it. So I gotta take the whole wheel down at once. But speaking of what's next, Patrick, what's our next wine?
The next wine.
And our next cheese, or cheese is, I suppose.
Cheese is, yeah. This is another great, I think, to Stu's point earlier and my point about how flexible I think you need to be with pairings, is that you have to take into account all your preferences from acidity and flavors and aromas and things that you find attractive or enjoyable, and work those into different cheeses or other things that you might have you're trying to pair it with, right? So with one person might pair somebody else's, and to my point earlier, so my wife and my daughter and I did our own pairing, and then tasting, and we wrote down what we liked, and I went to Steve, and he had his own opinion, and so did Val, and so everyone would have that same thing. And so, but we're going to try these two great cheeses, Mount Tam and the Pierre Point, right, with the rosé. This rosé Against the Machine, so beautifully named. Thank you, Fernando, who came up with that name. But this year is the Tempranillo primarily. It's 84% Tempranillo, 15% Mourvèdre or Mourvèdre, and 1% Pinot Noir. So Pinot rosé, of course, we pick reasonably or relatively early. Although we're still looking for the ripeness, good amount of ripeness. However, more acidity. So whereas Tempranillo and Mourvèdre, you might pick in the 24 to 27 range. We pick the rosés in the 21 to 24 range.
When Patrick talks about 21, those numbers, we're referring to the soluble solids, which it's called bricks. It's
Right.
called bricks, and they're just, most of them are sugar. So we're kind of looking at sugar level.
Yeah, it's not exactly percent sugar, but it's close to percent sugar. So
Sugarish.
Yeah, bricks actually goes down. If you want a wine, this is dry, but if you want a wine to go down to 0-ish sugar, it's actually -2-ish bricks, and so that's what would be close to 0 grams per liter. So anyhow, Tempranillo, it brings the tartness and the freshness and the kind of red fruit. Mourvèdre actually brings a tropicality, if that's a word.
It is now.
I like to make up stuff, so we'll go ahead and assume it's a word. A lot of tropicality in this wine, and you get this mango kind of papaya thing going, and so it's only 15% of the wine, but it brings a roundness, and the Pinot Noir is just a little bit of touch and texture to it. And so this wine, I think, could go with a lot of cheeses, and so we're actually going to go with 2 different cheeses, the Mount Tam and the Pierre Point. So
Here's a point there.
Pierce.
Oh, Pierce. I said Pierre?
You've said Pierre. You've said Pierre.
I might have even said Point Reyes, I think.
We know Pierce has a different connotation in the wine industry, so, or I should say the vine industry. So you try to avoid saying that word because it brings bad luck in the vineyard.
Why don't we talk about the cheeses instead of my pronunciation?
Sounds good.
Fair enough. Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think let's start with the Mount Tam. So real quick backstory on this beautiful baby. The Mount Tam was the first cheese that was made beyond the fresh cheeses that I mentioned earlier, beyond cottage cheese, fromage blanc, and the creme fraiche. So Peg and Sue were inspired by a lot of the French, those really soft French bries that were coming over in the 80s and 90s. Think like Saint Andre and like those popular ones that you see in the store today. So they wanted to make, their own triple cream, and they actually used. They basically were advised by a Dutch cheesemaker to, start the recipe for this cheese. Of course, most Dutch cheesemakers, they know how to make Gouda, but they don't know how to make those super soft, triple cream, French styles that they're looking for. It took a year to dial in the recipe. Lots of R&D, lots of trial and error. but essentially after a year, they finally tasted a batch. Like, this is it. This is the one. And Tam's actually celebrating its 20th birthday this year. So it's actually a year of celebrating.
Yay.
20. Maybe next year we'll do a drunken Tam. We'll like dip Tam in wine for its 21st birthday or something. We'll see. But yeah, so right here, the photo in front of you can kind of see the progression of Tam as it ages. You know, on the bottom being probably about 15 days old right there. The gluey rind is just starting to form. You're starting to see kind of a uniform paste on the bottom. You don't see the breakdown of the cream line as much, but obviously as you go up and up and up, you can see, you know, that triple cream really start to happen. That cream is breaking down. The rind is what it basically, the cheese is breaking down from the outside in, right? So as that rind forms, that's the candidum, that's the bacteria on the outside of that one. It's basically going to age in the wrapping paper and age from the outside in. So that top piece you see up there, that's what we want. That's 60 days old. That's prime time, oozing, buttery, creamy goodness. I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
So Sarah, quick question. We just got a note here from Chewy in Akron. Oh, sorry, Dayton. And he's asking, because this cheese is pasteurized, right?
Correct.
So then will it continue to age? You mentioned it ages in wrapper. Will it continue to age once it's in the store and in your home? Or is it stopped by the pasteurization?
So it's kind of it's like a multi-part question, right? So we don't put best by dates on our cheese. We kind of have an enjoy by window, basically meaning that kind of every batch is a little different. We celebrate the differences. So that 60-day mark is that top photo that we just saw. That's like your prime time enjoyment, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy it, you know, 70 days. But usually past 70 days, we start to see like browning on the rind. And you'll start to smell ammonia, any ammonia smells. That's when you know the cheese is turning. When you taste it, it'll be bitter. So that's kind of what happens towards the end of its life cycle. When it goes to the store, it's around 45, 50 days. So it gives it about, you know, a week or so to sell. That way, you know, usually, ideally, it's in the hands of the consumer, you know, in that like 55 to 60-day range right there. So
I wouldn't imagine it stays very long in their kitchen once they have it too.
No, it gets demolished. Hey,
Yeah.
Sarah, we have two other questions, or one for Sarah and one for Patrick. This one comes from Minnie on Peaks Island in Maine. What's the difference between a double cream and a triple cream? If you could just briefly walk us through that for Minnie.
yeah, definitely. So it's going to be the butter fat added, right? So particularly with the double cream, think about the whey cheese is made when they are pasteurized in the milk. The whey comes up to the top and then they skim that aside. So that's fat coming up to the top. If you leave that in there, that's double fat, right? The triple cream where we come in is we actually add creme fraiche to this recipe. So that's where the triple cream comes in, and that's in the initial stages of that cheese making process.
So you make your cowgirl creme fraiche and then add that into it?
Exactly. Yes. And it's made from the same milk source. So it's all the same source. That's really important to our cheesemakers as well. All of the source, the milk for this particular cheese, Mount Tam, that actually comes from the Tresh Dairy, which is, I have a picture of Kathy on here somewhere with her and her baby cows. The husband kind of more on the milking side of things, and she raises all the babies. So it's a true mom and pop operation, and they're extremely proud to have been working with us for all these years. But we definitely, we pay homage to them. They take such good care of their cows, and having that single source really helps with the uniformity of the cheese and just kind of maintaining, that flavor that people know, that consumers love and know.
So Sarah, excuse me for interrupting. I have a question because I get.
Hold that up a little bit.
Pardon me?
I was just telling Steve that maybe his screen.
Oh, his picture, yeah.
I was just trying to go for an art shot because I can't
It's
find
like when
it
my
on the
kids
screen.
take their pictures at an angle like this, yeah. And so I have a question. So can the cheesemakers or yourself or someone else, when you're tasting the cream, the milk ahead of time, are they able to, like, many people would ask me about, what's the difference between Cabernet grown here versus Cabernet grown up valley or over there, so So what if you know, and we talk a lot about in wine making, or in grape growing, you talk a lot about the terroir, which is all the things that go around, the conditions that go into mostly to do with the weather, also, but the kind of the situations that the grapes grow in, essentially. And so I guess my question is that as I'm sure it's probably, and I guess I probably know the answer, is all those things. Maybe is it the breed of cow and or what they're eating, or the weather that, where they're growing, that you can taste the, milk grown, on Lakeville Highway, or where it melts is milk grown up in wherever, out closer to the coast or something like that. I mean, is there, so yeah, go ahead.
Oh, definitely, yes. So I think like two parts to that one as well. The first being the breed of the cow. Certain cows produce milk that have different percentage of butter fat. So a Holstein, for example, is going to produce more volume of milk, but at a lower butter fat. But a Jersey cow, for example, will produce higher butter fat, but will yield less milk. So, yeah, those are some Jerseys right there. That's, we got backtrack real quick. That's Kathy real quick with from the Tresh Dairy. She's just hands-on. I love it. But, yeah, so the breed is definitely important. And then the other part is going to be seasonality. So this is actually a great segue into Pierce Point and why we do our 4 rotating seasonals. When Peg and Sue first thought of an idea of like a rotating seasonal cheese, they were trying to figure out, what do we put on the rind? There's so many different, people put red pepper, they put, chili flakes, they put all sorts of stuff, thyme, rosemary, all sorts of goodies on there, truffles, you name it. But they went and tasted the milk at 4 different times during the year and basically settled upon toppings or whatever would be on the seasonal cheese based on the flavors present in the milk. And they attributed that to whatever's growing in the field that time of year. So, springtime, or different small herbs that are growing up, usually in the lower end of the grass are, different flavors present there. In the summertime, it's a little bit drier. In the winter, they're supplementing with hay a little bit, so you get different flavors there. But yeah, it just varies throughout the year. So yeah, I guess this is a good segue into Pierce Point.
Let's get into Pierce Point.
Yeah. I just think aesthetically, this is probably the most beautiful cheeses I've ever seen.
Oh, it's amazing.
I don't know, you guys can see it, but it's Thai basil, calendula, and some other herbs on the rind. It is a single cream, not a triple, but I just find that it's beautiful. The breakdown is really lovely. Again, you look at that cream line and you look at the inside paste and the rind on the outside. It's just gorgeous. But yeah, we should taste both of these with the wine. We haven't done that. Yeah, maybe go back.
Oh my goodness, I've got a mess going on in front of me here. I am. It's a good thing I'm not on screen because.
So consistency for me, at least on the Pierce Point, it's become totally kind of runny, which I love, as opposed to the Mount Tam that's holding its shape much more in that core.
Mm-hmm.
I'll show people the visual aid, but you can see it.
Right. Yeah, the breakdown on that Pierce Point is more uniform on that single cream. Yeah, but I still the fact that it breaks down to be that buttery and beautiful, I think is amazing. It's definitely like a compliment to our cheesemakers, I think. But
so Patrick, what do you think? Why do you like the rosé with this?
On both of these cheeses, they have a totally different textures, and in the Mount Tam, it's funny because I remembered the Mount Tam being being a touch not stronger, but it's more mild compared to some of the other cheeses, including particularly Red Hawk and the Pierce Point is milder than those two, and so it doesn't have. Of course, the rind is less impacting, I'd say, and but I like but the Mount Tam texture is hard to beat, and it's beautiful, and it's just amazing. So I think it goes well with that cheese because the wine itself, I'm a bit partial to, obviously, because I drank it. Yeah, I made it, but it's a fun wine. It has a great acidity, but fruit, particularly the 19 version, is really yummy, I think, and has the potential to go with a lot of different things. And so the Mount Tam, I think quite frankly, I think it's good with the Mount Tam just because anything would be good with the Mount Tam. And so it's really a great combination with the Pierce Point though, because it really has a lot more flavors going on. And I love the spices and the herbs on the outside, but the texture is gorgeous too. And it just melts in your mouth. But then the acidity and the fruit of the wine kind of cleans your palate and kind of lifts everything. And so to me, that's a fun combo. It's really, this is like before I'm eating dinner, I like to eat like this, lighter whites and rosés and yummy, super yummy cheese. And so that to me there's a few better starts or finish the wine or dinner even that way too. I like it for dessert, but so either right before dinner or just after dinner, or maybe even both for that matter. I've never done a before and after dinner cheese course, but I think that might be this weekend perhaps.
Patrick, we got a question coming in from Larry who's asking about, it says, Patrick, Mourvedre and Tempranillo are not traditional partners. Where did the idea originate on Rosé Against the Machine? So
anarchists, of course, I don't want to do anything, and we don't do anything that's traditional there. And so that's part of the game to the wines, is that it's non-traditional. And so, but there are a lot of ways to do things, right, Steve? And so I almost said it. And so Tempranillo. No, all these grapes grow throughout Europe. Obviously, Tempranillo primarily more in Spain. Mourvedre, both France and Spain, though. Mataro it's called in southern Spain and western. And so it does grow, and both of those do grow. They don't generally put them together. And this is definitely, and they certainly wouldn't put in Pinot Noir, even though it's just a drop in there too. So it's a non-traditional blend, but I think that you'll hopefully agree that it's delicious together. And so there's lots of things that aren't traditional that do actually go really well. So the reason I did kind of wanted to think outside of the box. I love Tempranillo. I wanted to think of what would go well with it. Mourvedre, particularly in 19, this vintage, I did rounded the wine out completely. I was looking for some kind of pairing component that was outside of the box, and so I think we've achieved it. And
Mourvedre has a little more heft, right? Yeah. So you bring a little.
Even though we pick it a month later at lower bricks than the Tempranillo. The Tempranillo is actually riper, but the Mourvedre brings that roundness side to side to the palate, and so you get the Tempranillo is actually destemmed and then whole cluster pressed. The Mourvedre was just whole cluster pressed, fermented separately, then blended together. And again, I'm a little partial to these cheeses, though. I think that almost anything would go well with them. I do like the wines, but these are really, it's a fun tasting for sure.
Well, there's a reason why Cowgirl has won every award possible. Hey, we'll kind of slide into our next wine, but before we do that, maybe a little palate cleanser. So I'm going to go back to the Blanc de Blancs, and kind of bubbles are a great way to kind of reset the palate, start over. Steve is kind of wiping down his beard. It's a fake beard that he's actually glued on some lichen, locally harvested lichen from West Marin County. So I'm going to go back to the bubbles really quick, and then that way I'll be able to taste. We'll be able to taste Pierce Point again in a different context. You were going to say something, Patrick?
Yeah, I have a question that just came in from somewhere, Patrick in Petaluma, apparently.
Oh, great, thank you.
If you drink from the bottle, taste any different than from your glass, Stu?
Well, I would say yeah. So every vessel you drink from is going to be a little bit different. The thing that is so beautiful, thank you, Patrick. The thing that is so beautiful about drinking out of a glass is you get the aromas. And now, will Riedel and all the glass makers try to sell you different glasses for different wines? Absolutely. But
you know what? This is actually made in Riedel glass. The bottle's made from Riedel. So
fantastic.
You can just drink straight from the bottle, Lexi. But then it pours all over your beard when you do that, though.
Sarah was so angry, she just stormed off camera. She was like, I've had enough of this. So I think, hey, Sarah, we're gonna kind of, now that I've kind of checked out I've kind of reset with the Blanc the Blanc de Blancs. I'm going to pour our recently released 2017 Pinot Noir, and we are again in Sonoma County, but a different vineyard here than we did with our bubbles. Our bubbles, we were in same region. It's called the Petaluma Gap, and Sarah lives in Petaluma. Patrick lives in Petaluma, but this is closer on the Pen Grove side, so a little bit further east. And this is called Rogers Creek Vineyard, and a little south of Pen Grove as well. Now we're going to be tasting Pierce's Point and the Wagon Wheel with this one. Sarah, can you tell?
You can taste all of them. We were just going to taste the Wagon Wheel.
We're going to taste all of them. Hey, Sarah, can you we've kind of learned about the Pierce's Point. We'll taste that in a minute. Can you walk us through the Wagon Wheel, our next cheese?
Definitely, yes. So, as a creamery, we had progressed. So we were making fresh cheeses, then we're making soft ripened cheeses, and then our lovely founder said it was time for us to make a pressed cheese. So this means basically in the cheese making world, there's all different ways of making cheese, but texture is a really important thing. What's the end result? What are you trying to get to at the end? With these first 3 cheeses we tasted, when the cheese is being made and when the milk is cooking down and the curds start to form, these curds are basically gently put into these small rounds. They're kind of scooped up and gently put in, and that's what makes that soft texture, right? So now think about, your cheddars, your Goudas, the texture is so much firmer. Then what's happening is these curds are being pressed together by hand, and they're put into these forms. Particularly the Wagon Wheel is actually a 15-pound wheel. It is made specifically for chefs in mind, but we do sell it to a lot of local markets, and they break it down for their cheese counter. But this cheese is amazing. It's a Wagon Wheel. It's beautiful. It's aged about 4 months. The piece that I have here, we do a little bit of salt brine washing during its life as it ages, but nothing crazy. And it's just a beautiful cheese. It's versatile. It's meltable. It's super savory. Got some brothy notes on there. I say we just dive right in and taste it.
Yeah, I think so. And this was maybe original. And was it like for the Zuni Cafe, and kind of a legendary restaurant in San Francisco, right? No, was that one of the,
definitely one of the first restaurant this cheese and use it.
I didn't know if that was true, but I remember I know that was the legend.
What did they do with it there? Was it on a board, or did they cook with it?
Grilled cheese with it, and then I believe they put it into a pasta dish at one point as well. Like I said, it's super versatile. We do a raclette pop-up stand with this one, where we take the half wheel, melt it under the raclette bar, and then you basically slide the melted cheese onto potatoes or pickles or bread or whatever you want. It's absolutely magical.
I have a little backyard. I modify like a little thing that goes on the Weber grill, a modification to turn it into a pizza oven, and so I'm excited to explore that with a little homemade pizza this weekend.
Oh, definitely.
Because it's such a good melter, right?
It is, yes, yeah.
Stu, what can you tell us about the wine?
So 2017, we harvested this Pinot Noir. It comes from the Sonoma Coast. It's that region that all the cool kids are playing in, called Petaluma Gap, right? And we know that that's the area where there's a little west of Petaluma, there's a gap in the mountains, the Petaluma Gap, which allows the fog to kind of blanket that area. And so for the last 15, 20 years, a lot of attention's been placed on this area. In 2017, we harvested this a week before the fires. I think we harvested on September 27th. And right now we source 2 different clones from this vineyard, from Rogers Creek. We source 667, which is kind of a clone that's noted for a little back end, a little beefiness. And then also, another clone that is not light by any stretch of the imagination, clone 777. That's kind of where we're playing these days. If you look at the numbers, the chemistry on this wine, I don't know if we have it on the website. Patrick picked at 24.2, which is like Pinot heaven. and then his pH was at 3.52 and his TA at 5.9. What does that mean? That is like straight out of like the winemaking heaven textbook. Patrick absolutely nailed this wine. And I think just yesterday we got like, you know, a 4-star rating from, I don't even know if that's been announced yet. That
Yeah, it was a mid 90s score. I think it gets announced next week.
Yes. So
It was that was the Nebraska State Fair. Which one was that?
it was the
No, it wasn't just Nebraska. It was Omaha.
it was local. So we don't want an entire state. It's all about localish. So it was the Omaha State Fair.
Omaha County. All right.
Patrick, you did a good thing on it. And unlike a lot of Pinots, which have kind of a short time in barrel, we went 18 months on this bad boy. Beautiful aromatics, and Pinot is a perfect food wine.
Dude, I'm going to correct you. We actually went 14 months on it, not 18.
Oh, okay. I thought we went for a longer.
You can smell it. You can smell the difference. Steve knows 14 versus 15.
14 versus 18.
I don't smell any 15, 16, 17 in there.
We have to skip those. I thought we went a little longer on this one.
You can see it like with the layers of the cheese. You can see it in the wine.
Exactly. I can see the timeline.
So I'm going to check it out. I'm going to go back to Pierce Point really quick to check out, because the herbaceous character on the cheese can be, and this is a beautiful, beautiful goo.
What happens when you throw all the cheeses into a blender and then you try them all together? How does that work?
Oh man, it would probably be very fun project.
The
I would
cheese smoothie of sorts?
like melt it all down together and do like a 5 cheese mac and cheese or something like that.
So I've got a question for you, Sarah, which is mostly just to take the microphone away from Patrick's extremely interesting questions about blenders. Do you, so Cowgirl Creamery started, are you now nationwide, or like if somebody's in New York or, you know, Massachusetts, whatever, are they going to be able to find it fairly easily, or is it only going to be really specialty stores? Whereas here and I'm in Marin right now, and I can't really, I've never looked at Safeway, but if I go to any grocery store that has a decent cheese section, it's going to be there, right?
Definitely. So I would say, you know, California saturated, you know, any local kind of privately owned market, like the smaller markets, that definitely will be there. Whole Foods, we have somebody just put that on the chat. Definitely everywhere.
Dolores said,
That's
Dolores
Delcy.
said Whole Foods.
Hey, Delcy.
Or Delcy, yep.
So my question actually came because earlier this week, Delcy is in Cape Cod, and she wasn't able to order the cheeses in time, and so she was looking for some suitable replacements. And while I said there is no such thing as a suitable replacement, other replacements would be X, Y, and Z. But yeah,
Definitely, yeah. No, we work with we distribute locally. We have a couple routes, you know, in the immediate Bay Area and then down in LA, but everywhere else we send to distributors. So we work with a number of distributors across the country, and we're working on getting more traction in other places. So, you know, East Coast is definitely a spot where we're trying to get, you know, into. Murray's Cheese. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that crew, but that's a new one this year that we're going to get into all their little cheese shops. So we're very excited about that one. Yeah, it's an ongoing project for sure.
How do they gauge the sizes of cheese? You know, cheeseries. Do you talk about number of wheels, or, you know, like in winery, you know, you can talk about tons or amount of cases, or how do you size like how big of a brewery they talk about, and you know, half barrels or whatever, you know? So how do you gauge?
Yeah, I think the number that we had, 2019, we made 300,000 pounds of Mount Tam specifically.
Oh, wow.
That's just one cheese. That's our bestseller. But so as far as pounds go, that's quite a lot. I can't say much about the others, but because that one is our bestseller. But yeah, hundreds of thousands of pounds.
And hey, Sarah, can you also talk about the Cheese Club? Because you guys ship nationally, so and my wife and I have, even though we can get it right here, during COVID, we've had our little cheese shipments come in. Can you talk about the cheese clubs?
Yeah, definitely. Everything is available through our website. There are a number of collections you can buy and send, buy for yourself, send as gifts. Beyond that, we do have a cheese club. So again, all that info is online as well. Cheese clubs vary. There's a monthly one. There's, you can get one that's less frequent or more frequent. But definitely refer to the website. They can help you out there. It's actually a different department than what I work in, but they are awesome and they will definitely be able to help you get your cheese.
Yeah, stay away from those salespeople.
Yeah, we're rotten.
Well, it goes great with our wine club as well. So for those that aren't familiar, Anarchist Wine Co. Wine Club has 2 shipments a year, and you can choose from the Anarchist Wine Co. brand or the Foundry Wines brand. And obviously, as you can tell, they go great with the cheeses. So I think everybody on here that isn't a member of both should become a member of both soon.
Mm-hmm.
There's my shameless plug.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Steve.
I think my plug real quick, I'll say we have a collection on our website. It's called the Good Neighbors Collection. We are essentially focusing on some of our smaller partners, different small cheese producers from across the country that are probably smaller than we are actually. We are trying to give them a little love. It's harder for, as it is for everyone that's kind of has small businesses at this time. But, we're trying to shed a little light on them and show them a little love. So if you are so, excited to go buy some cheese, the Good Neighbor Collection is definitely my first, pick for y'all. So.
Nice. And Sarah, where did you grow up?
You just dropped a y'all.
Yeah, exactly.
I did. It's the country in me. I'm actually from California, born and raised, but I'm a horse girl. I'm a country girl, so it comes out every once in a while.
Okay, there you go.
I was like, oh my God, not another South Carolina person.
Yeah.
We already work with Patrick.
Love those things.
Yes, exactly.
So Stu, can I ask you any final notes on the Pinot and the Wagon Wheel together?
Well, it's going to sound like hokey. It's going to sound like sales shtick, but it really goes well because there is a butteriness about the Wagon Wheel, and the Pinot has a nice acidity, and they kind of play off each other for me because, I'm not the pairing guy. I'm the anti-pairing guy. But it kind of helps polish the back end of the Pinot, and the acid on the Pinot kind of helps lift the Wagon Wheel. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, totally. Patrick, can I get your thoughts on the Pinot and the Wagon Wheel?
Yeah, I think I shared Stu's sentiment there, and that I think that Pinot is easily the best food pairing wine out there. There's so many different ways you could go. Wagon Wheel is a great cheese, really nice texture and flavor. It's creamy but a little bit salty too, and I like the acidity of the Pinot to pair with that. Quick question about crackers from someone in the.
That's Tom Harlan there.
Mr. Harlan.
Tom Harlan dropping it.
So in general, do you have does it depend on the cheese itself? And is it and/or preference, or is there certain crackers that you are pairing, think of cracker-like substances that Steve's a no-grain guy, so he can't eat crackers, I guess. So do you have any suggestions for someone like that?
So we actually have a partnership with Rustic Bakery. They're also, they're in Marin County, just down the road from us. We sell, I'll show you our little retail box. These are kind of like our little Cowgirl branded crackers, but they're essentially a little flatbread sourdough cracker, kind of plain in flavor. So that's my advice to you is, if you get something that has, onions or, seeds on it, it's going to maybe affect the flavor of the cheese. So I think if you're going to get a cracker, I would say just make it like a plain cracker. Nothing extra on top, just so you can kind of, preserve the integrity of the flavors of the cheese, and you can kind of experience that a little bit better.
Does Rustic make your crackers, or do you make your crackers?
Rustic Bakery makes all of the products. It's just one particular box that they do a little cross promo on for us, which we appreciate. So
Absolutely.
Locals.
yes.
2 local Marin brands coming together. And Sarah, how about you? Could I get what are your thoughts on the Pinot with the Wagon? Or I could even broaden it out. What was your favorite pairing out of the 3 or 3.5 we did?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to bring it back to one that we talked about that we actually didn't have on this board today was the fromage blanc and the blanc de blanc. It was funny when we were all chit-chatting, talking about, different pairings. It was one that we all loved, but we didn't get a chance to all together. So I think the point being, like, don't be afraid to expand and taste all types of cheeses, all types of wine. You just never know what you're going to get, I think, but I think today, for me personally, I don't know. I think the Red Hawk with the Blanc de Blanc to me does it. Red Hawk is my personal favorite, and I think the bubbles with just that beefy cream, that does it for me.
You bring up a good point. One thing that was really interesting to me. So for everybody on the show here, Sarah had sent us a sample of cheeses, and we sent them a few wines, and Cowgirl did a kind of tasting, we did a tasting, and then we compared notes and kind of came up with these pairings together. But one of the things also, the fromage blanc, I completely agree with you, but I actually thought the three soft cheeses, the cottage cheese, the fromage blanc, and the creme fraiche which, first of all, if you find Cowgirl Creamery cottage cheese, it's the best cottage cheese. I think my dad's on here and he eats cottage cheese like once or twice a day. You got to find the Cowgirl Creamery cottage cheese because it's out of this world. And
totally agree.
Yeah, and the creme fraiche is by far and away the best creme fraiche I've ever had.
The fromage blanc is awesome, by the way, and I totally agree with Sarah. The fromage blanc and blanc de blanc is ridiculous combo. I mean, that's great cheese.
So it's a great point that you make, Sarah, is that, try different things. Don't stay in a box. Don't think necessarily triple cream has to go with wine or whatever. Because I mean, honestly, I think creme fraiche was probably my favorite. We were just thinking, okay, maybe we'll try some of these other ones because creme fraiche also is a little bit difficult to sit here on a screen and
spoon. I mean, I'm not against it. Don't get me wrong.
I'm not. I have no problem with it.
Yeah.
I was just looking at my notes, the bubbles. I had fromage blanc, Red Hawk, and creme fraiche. I was like, yum! All three of those. They were so good. I was surprised. I was also like Steve. I actually not a huge cottage cheese. I mean, I like creme. I didn't think that soft cheeses were going to be my favorite, and I was totally wrong. They were all delicious, and I've never said a cottage cheese. I've never talked about cottage cheese other than until now. It's fantastic. It was like, oh my God, this is good. I'd eat this all the time. And so it was so good. Bravo to the cheesemakers.
Yes. Cheers to the cheesemakers and the wine.
Hey. Wrap it up.
Real quick, just one last question. Is the cottage cheese and the creme fraiche, are those available at least locally in Marin out in retail stores, or is it direct through you guys or at the Tomales Bay Foods Net building?
Definitely available locally at many of the markets we service. If your local market doesn't have it, ask the cheesemonger, hey, I want that creme fraiche. That's the best way to get that product in there. They'll bring it in. If they have one customer that asks for it, they'll bring it in. If they're a good monger, I like to say. I will say also that cottage cheese also has creme fraiche in the recipe, which probably adds to its pretty
little body.
So,
That's good.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
I'm going to go ahead and bring us home here. We'll stop the recording in just a minute, but just as a couple of little housekeeping notes, to learn more about Cowgirl Creamery, cowgirlcreamery.com is the website. And I see a question come in and we'll answer that in a minute. We're happy to stay on for a few minutes extra and answer any questions that people have. We definitely check out Cowgirl Creamery. Ask your cheesemongers if you're on the East Coast or you're someplace that it's not readily available and you're not spoiled with these amazing cows that we have here. As well as tomorrow night, we have our Wine Foundry, our book club called Reading Between the Wines. And we're featuring Nick Jackson's Beyond Flavor book. Stu will be leading that for anybody that is, you don't have to have read the book. You can just get online and chat about it. Stu, how do they find that? Is it on the Anarchist Wine Co?
Yeah, we have our virtual on the virtual thing or the digital tastings kind of stuff. You can check it out there. You can also go to our social. And this will be an interesting talk tomorrow. And so I'm excited, and I will be a good boy.
And then next Wednesday, it's going to be Wine Foundry Wednesday, where Patrick Our enologist Connor and Stu will all be out in the vineyards checking out fruit set at 3 different vineyards that we contract from. And we're gonna just kind of be perched around checking in on the growing season. You'll learn a lot. Hopefully the connectivity for them is really good, or else you're stuck with me and this cheese and probably the rest of this wine. So again, stay on the line. We'll be back for Inquisitive Sips 2 weeks from tonight. And thank you all so much. Feel free to stay on and ask any questions.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Guys, for your time.
Hey, Sarah, can you ship all around to